Speaking of things that aren't so awesome, California school is going to have to pay over $3 million after rejecting an LGBTQ curriculum. The curriculum covered Harvey Milk, who is the first openly gay elected official in the United States, who was assassinated in 1978. Here's the thing about Harvey Milk. He was known to have been preying on underage boys. He was in a quote-unquote relationship with a 16-year-old at one point when he was in his 30s. But of course, children have to learn about him in school as if he's a hero. And this district, the school board said, no, sorry, we're not interested in teaching our kids that. So Newsom said, we're going to fine you $1.5 million and force you to pay another $1.6 million in shipping costs associated with the material that were sent to these schools. So we're seeing stories like this all the time. I'm glad to see that the school board is fighting back. Look at Newsom, who claims to be the gatekeeper and the warrior for free speech when he's talking about book bans and the fact that all ideas need to be allowed in California, telling people that they actually have to have this curriculum forced on them when their school board has said, no, we don't want this.
There's a hill you have to die on, and eventually, otherwise you keep losing. And I think, again, it's easy for me to say this because it's not my school or it's not my $3 million, but the answer is no. Yeah. We're just not going to pay that fine, and we're not going to teach it. And are you going to extort $3 million from us? Are you going to shut down the school? Well, then you know what? You shut down the school. Sorry. Like eventually you just have to stop giving into this because if school boards, what's the purpose of having a school board if then the governor can just override it, and then the governor is overridden by the Department of Education, and where does it end? So ultimately it's really just Joe Biden. Joe Biden decides everything.
That's absolutely right. Well, I mean, these people are all tyrannical, and it's so frustrating because you had Obama come out the other day and write this letter saying, oh, it's wrong to ban books. And of course, the books that are being banned here are generally pornographic. They contain materials that are scarring for children. And it's the parents who are saying we don't want our children to see this content. The vast majority of these quote unquote book bans are led by parental groups. And even opponents of that will acknowledge this, but they'll say these are parents who are backwards religious fundamentalists, even though firstly, as far as I'm aware, I don't know that there's actually a strong religious component to it. I would imagine there is, just in the sense that we're in a country which is based on Christian values. But these people, I know some of the people who go up and fight these school boards, and they're not all religious people by any means. So the left will try to smear these people. They'll try to smear the grassroots efforts to get this pornographic content out of schools. And the truth is, it's because they know that's the only option. They can't try to blame the usual actors, the big donors, any corrupt political class for this. They can tell this is coming from parents. This is coming from families who are saying, stop preying upon our children.
And I think you'll see these tests going forward. This idea that you don't want this type of curriculum in your school for what seems to be legitimate reasons, and so you will have to pay a fine. So you feel guilty, and so you don't feel like maybe we shouldn't do that. It's going to hurt our kids' education. These tests are going to be something that parents unfortunately face a lot. It reminds me a little bit of this story about the school district in Utah. A liberal parent said, well, I think you should ban the Bible because the Bible talks about sex and the Bible has pornographic scenes.
But it doesn't
and one of the,
have pornographic scenes,
one of the state lawmakers who had been really pushing to keep LGBTQ curriculum, and again, I should say sexually explicit curriculum out of school, said, well, if this is the price we have to pay, that's okay, because I would rather make sure that your kids are protected, even if that means they have to learn about the Bible at home. And I find it interesting that we're coming up against these tests pretty regularly right now. If we have to keep something out, what are we willing to do for that?
I think a great tactic that I've seen a lot of parents do is they try to go to the school board meetings and they try to read the book out loud.
Yes.
Yeah, and they're stopped. I think DeSantis did it at a press conference and all the networks had to go to commercial break. Yeah. And that's just the most valuable time. If I can't say this to you, and we're all adults here, if I said these things right now, YouTube would find Timcast. I mean, it wouldn't find me, so I guess I can go ahead and say them, right? I can drop the F-bomb. It's not my show.
Yeah,
right?
exactly.
So,
do whatever you want here.
And Tim's not here, so Tim's not here. Who cares? But I think that's such a valuable tactic. Like show how vile these things are, and then stop hiding behind gay people to do it. Stop. It's pornography. Don't hide. It's either sexual exploitation of children. Stop using gay people as your shield because you're a bunch of perverts. It's quite frankly very.
I got to say, the
exhausting.
book we have right here, I opened it to a random page and just the first thing I saw was like I can't even describe it. It was disgusting.
It's vicious. It's really disgusting. And so genderqueer is one example of this. The other example we've brought up, because we actually have the book here, is this book is Gay. And this is a book that is in schools and school libraries, and it actually explains how to sign up for gay hookup apps. Now, here's the thing. It does say, oh, these apps are for adults, but hold on a second. This stuff, the way smartphones work with their interface, it's not rocket science. Adults can figure it out. Why is there a guide on how to sign up for these apps in schools where minors can check them out? You don't put something in a book that a minor shouldn't know and then write, if you're under 18, don't read past this point, or this section isn't for you.
And
that's
then
not how this
wink at
works.
you. They're
yeah,
like,
yeah, exactly.
Don't do it. We're just going to put it here and let you make your own decisions. I think that's the craziest thing, that the argument that comes up and that I hear pretty frequently is, people need to hear these things because we need to have a sex positive culture, and we need to have a culture that these issues are life and death for some people, because if you don't know, you don't feel affirmed, this, that, and the other, then, you're in danger of all kinds of terrible things. And of course, we want to live in a compassionate society. But does that mean minors need to read sexually explicit content in schools? No, it doesn't.
Well, no, but here's the thing. They say, we want a sex positive society. What does that mean? What does it mean? What does sex positive mean? They're trying to negate the purpose of sex by spreading perversion. By definition, they are sex negative. The purpose of sex is unity and procreation. If you're trying to strip that away from it, you are negating it. You are sex negative. What they're really trying to say is we want to spread perversion. That's all. That's all.
I think we're sexualized enough as a society.
Yeah. I mean, do
Right?
you get
you can't watch any commercial without it being. You can't watch any music video, minus a couple of country ones. You really can't watch much without it being about sex.
Exactly. How much of a pervert do you have to be to complain about the fact that there's not enough of it out there all the time?
And should we be telling teenagers your sexual identity is the biggest thing you should know and identify and think about all the time, right? Isn't there enough pressure as a young adult to come of age and to grapple with difficult life problems? Like, do we need to say your libraries need to be stocked with this, so you're thinking about it all the time, when really we should be encouraging them to pursue their intellectual passions, to develop good moral character, right? Like, there is no reason that this should be the number one conversation you have with your teens, no matter how you think their orientation will end up.
Especially when you consider, and I hate saying this because I don't like to knock America. I love this country and I love the people in this country, but I will say it bluntly, especially when you realize how ignorant our young people are. Like, you can say poorly educated, and they are. You could just flat out and say dumb. Like, these are subjects that, we shouldn't broach them ever. But if all of our kids had straight A's and then the school board was like, well, should we start thinking about other things? But our kids are incredibly dumb.
Yes.
Like they basically, you see the numbers, 30%, 35% don't read at level, can't perform math at level. Most of them can't write or read script. So you scratch your head and say, well, we want our young people to be sex positive. It's like, I just like them to be literate first. Like, can we just do the basics?
Right.
Yeah, exactly. And any adult who tells you they have this agenda, like, oh yeah, I want this child to be really accepting of a lot of different sexual things, like, okay,
but why?
Because I've said this before on the show, but we ask this question as conservatives. Why do kids need to see that? That's the wrong question. The question is, why do you need to show that to a kid? Why are you so invested in ensuring that a kid sees that? And I think we all know
no
why.
kid likes to read about sex until they are a certain age. And it's I don't care if it's hetero, homo, it doesn't matter. Like they're introducing it to children at an age that it's so uncomfortable, and it should be uncomfortable. It's healthy. Like a 9-year-old should not be a sexual being. And when they say, well, everyone is a sexual being, if you think a 9-year-old is a sexual being, you are a pedophile.
You belong in jail.
Yeah,
Yes.
absolutely.
Yeah.
And it's different when you're talking about, especially guys, and they're hitting their hormones, and they would read any book that's, well, maybe not those, but they'd be more interested in sex books and sex talks. But the fact that we're doing this with 6-year-olds and 7-year-olds is just so disgusting.
Yeah,
I would agree. Well, I just want to mention one thing quickly. Even with what you're saying, like when kids go through puberty and they start noticing the opposite sex, you're right that they have an interest there. But that's also why you need to be even more protective at that point and ensure that they don't end up seeing disgusting things that are going to pervert them. Because they'll end up going and seeking out material, and there's so much perversion online that they'll stumble into. The solution isn't like, well, let's show them the weirdest, grossest stuff stuff we can find. The solution is educate them on the dangers of looking at pornography. Talk to them about the fact that researchers are discovering a strong link between pornography and impotence. You tell young men that, I promise you, that's going to alter their behavior, right? People need to be protected from these things. These things shouldn't be forced onto them. But again, I think we're all pretty clear on what the agenda is here. We know why there's an interest on the part of so many people in this system to get minors invested in this perverse content. And it's telling that the reason this school board rejected this content that California is trying to force on them is because it was covering the first elected gay politician in the country who's celebrated by the left and viewed as a martyr, and who was exploiting and preying upon and abusing underage boys.
Yeah.
Had a 16-year-old quote unquote boyfriend when he was in his 30s. That's not a boyfriend. It's a minor he groomed.
I haven't seen said chapter. I'd love to know what the chapter was, because that's what they're saying. Like, this was a book that was explaining that Harvey Milk was killed in 19 whatever year it was.
Yeah.
But I guarantee you it was not that. You know, and if you had a chapter of the 70s for 14, 15, 16-year-old kids, and you talked about unrest in the 70s, famous people who were assassinated, you can go through the list. You can throw his name down because he was famous and he was assassinated. But I would love to see the actual chapter. What
are
they
they saying
him.
about his life?
Because I guarantee you it was not that innocuous. Like, we just mentioned that he was a gay politician who was killed. I'm like, oh, no, you didn't.
Thanks for watching this clip from the Timcast IRL podcast. Hang out with us live Monday through Friday at 8 p.m. and become a member over at timcast.com for uncensored, members-only shows exclusive. Thanks for hanging out, and we'll see you all next time.